but try to find a way that is not just standing there and looking at us. Try to get something that is a bit more alive. And I would probably bend it even more. It's a stylized approach, so you can over-exaggerate, over-emphasize shapes and poses. I always would recommend to do more instead of too less. So if it's a pose, I usually don't care about a realistic pose or if a body can really move that way. I always go with, does it feel right? Does it feel like this and that motion? And I don't really care about the anatomy that much. I just feel like, okay, if it's nice when the characters bend it more like in this and that direction, and it feels more dynamic and it feels more alive, even if the character would maybe not be able to move that way, I would keep it that way, because it's, in the end, it's about the feeling you get from the image and not about an anatomic, realistic depiction of the character. So I don't have my tablet attached to it right now, so I can really paint over it, but I can point out a few things. Let's see, let's start with this one. So it's supposed to be for an astrological art jam, but couldn't finish it in time. Wanted to mesh the scenarios with Artemis Diana, the goddess of moon, and make it look like a tarot card, but with more depth than the usual flat style. I think this is a great start, because you have the tarot like format, which is a really nice way. I also really enjoy this format, especially for my personal work, because it's like this portrait and not landscape format, which I personally enjoy a lot. Having this in mind while painting is definitely the very, very important thing. If you have a tarot card in mind, it might seem obvious, but it's sometimes not. Use the format you're working with. For example, I see a lot of people painting maybe in a square or maybe in a very undecided format. And I always ask, my first question is, why did you choose that format? And people usually don't really know. And having a clear idea of what's going on or what you want to achieve is the first step, and a really important step. So I think this is really cool. The same is that you, in this case, want it to be some like rendered elements, like not as flat as you usually see in tarot cards, with the astrological elements. And I think this is working out quite well. But I would say go more into the astrological graphic things to combine it with your rendered person, for example. Like you have the moon, which is a great start. Use these elements like the stars to make it even more connected to the background, and then get this nice contrast between the stylized and graphical elements and the rendered character. I think this could be pushed a bit more and makes it more interesting, because the contrast will be very, very hard and harsh, but this will make it really interesting, because the graphical shape here on the head really frames the head, which is great. You could maybe think about this area here being a bit more bright, so you can frame the head a bit more, but at the same time you already have a bright head, so this is not that important. But what I used to do a lot, or what I enjoy a lot, is using these graphical elements, like the circle here, putting it behind something darker, like the hair, to create this very, very readable and easy to grasp focal point. In this case, this dark background and the fairly dark hair might a bit hard to read, because it's pretty close in value. So I would probably add a bit more light here to just make the whole hair a bit more readable. It's not that we have to have something really, really intense so we get the whole shape of the head. It's nice that it's merging with the background, but just to make sure that the eye of the person observing the piece is not getting lost in this area. You can solve this if you put in a light on the hair, or maybe make the whole background a bit brighter. Maybe with this moon shape here is maybe filled with a brighter value, and you can still have the nice separate, like the circle in the middle, and then the, I don't know how it's called, side shape moon. You can still have a separation between these two, but maybe a bit brighter in the back. But you have to check and try it out. Both would work, I think. What I really like is that you are trying this bold approach between rendered elements and graphical elements. But I would say if you do it, keep in mind that the pieces you are trying to render out quite well, like the bow and the arm and everything. I know it's not finished yet, but when you finish it, make sure these elements here in the foreground are really well rendered or really abstract. So you as a viewer know exactly this is on purpose or not. Because if you see something that is a bit undecided, it's usually tends to strike people as badly painted or maybe not as decided, and people like seeing stuff that is like confident. And if you put in like a clear concept then and try to follow it as good as possible, then people will see it. For example, if you keep this bow like this, then I would have the feeling, okay, is this now an element which should be more graphical, like Tarot style, or is it one of the pieces that you want to render out in more depth and more detail? And if I can't tell it, it has some kind of undecided vibe and could read as, like, let's say, badly painted. And yeah, you obviously don't want that. So show confidence and boldness is definitely very important. In general, I like the way you framed it and the way you put the person in, but I would say give it a bit more dynamic. Like let's try to paint in a line. Like if you have this person just standing like this, it's a bit hard to get the whole dynamic and the whole person feel alive. So I would probably, even if it's a stylized character and it's a card and it's not really something in motion, I would always try to just focus on movement, even if it's a stylized approach. And you already have it with this nice hair sitting in the background. I would use that and give the whole person a bit of more dynamic as well. Like just maybe bend the character a bit more over, maybe even this direction. Okay, now it's getting a bit weird. But try to find a way that is not just standing there and looking at us. Try to get something that is a bit more alive. And I would probably bend it even more. It's a stylized approach, so you can over-exaggerate, over-emphasize shapes and poses. I always would recommend to do more instead of do less. So if it's a pose, I usually don't care about it a realistic pose or if a body can really move that way. I always go with, does it feel right? Does it feel like this and that motion? And I don't really care about the anatomy that much. I just feel like, okay, if it's nice when the characters bend it more like in this and that direction, and it feels more dynamic and it feels more alive, even if the character would maybe not be able to move that way, I would keep it that way, because it's, in the end, it's about the feeling you get from the image and not about an anatomic realistic depiction of the character. At least if it's a stylized approach. If you want something like drawn from life, and then when the realism and everything is important, then you probably have to think about that more. But in general, in this stylized realm, I would always over exaggerate and over emphasize. You can turn it back, but you can turn it back down more easily than getting more into it afterwards, because it's the same with color. If you paint in black and white and add color afterwards, I usually tend to be not as bold and courageous about adding those colors. If I start in colors, I usually have more ideas about what I can use. I use the colors more boldly, like maybe doing a whole red background, which I wouldn't do if I started in black and white, because then I try to apply the colors with multiplier, whatever options we have, and they usually don't come out as vivid and as interesting as you just start with colors. You can always go back to black and white and turn the colors down, but putting the colors there afterwards is more. And this applies, I think, to the dynamic and pose and shape language and everything. So I would say be more bold and be more experimental, and then check out if it's too much. And if it's too much, in your opinion, you can always turn down it a bit more. But I would always go in that direction. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
What else? The colors are pretty nice. It's balanced. I would probably say if I see some pinks and purples there, I would probably add more of those here and there to just be able to connect the colors a bit more. It's not only there. So we have the two colors like the gold and the blue. And if you introduce this tertiary, like third color, I would always try to make sure it's sitting somewhere in the piece to connect it visually. Even if it doesn't make sense, I think I have to see this third color somewhere else just to tie it together. I would always think about the colors all over the whole piece without the content in mind. So if you see, okay, there's a color I used and I really liked it, don't think about where it could make sense again. Just put it where, if you see the piece as an abstract combination of colors, where does this color make sense? And then you can put it in there, maybe even in the hair, for example. Even if she doesn't have pink hair, why not putting the pink in there? It just looks cool. And I would always encourage people to think about where colors would work instead of where colors would make sense, because that is usually ending up being more interesting. This also applies to this teal color here. I would probably want to see that somewhere else as well, just to make sure it's not standing out that much. Maybe you want that it stands out, then make sure it's really on purpose and you really feel like this is something that is something alien, like something that is on purpose, not fitting to the background. But if that's not the case, I would always try to connect it with some other element that has the same color. All right. Yeah, I think that's it. I really like the way you rendered out these pieces here. Just make sure, one last note, do not overdo it in one part and then neglect everything else. This is a bit hard to tell how far you will take this piece, because it's, as you said, it's not finished yet. So on the road of finishing it, just make sure you don't have one spot that is super different to all the other elements. I usually try to paint everything in the same, or not in the same range of details, but at the same time. So if I want to have more details in this area here, you can do it, but don't paint don't paint in this area for 2 hours and neglect these areas totally, because then you will probably experience a disconnect. So I always try to paint on like this zoom stage and paint every element at the same time. And then if I know, okay, the piece works and I need just a few more details in the character, then I zoom in and then I start refining all these elements here. But I always go back, zooming out, and check if it still visually connects to all the other elements in the piece. And I'm afraid if you work on this more, that you will lose the connection between these highly rendered elements and maybe the abstract background. So keep that in mind. All right. I hope that was helpful.
Right. Now, Spectre's in the audience right now, so thank you so much. I
Cool.
think I have a few ideas that I'd like to try and apply from your feedback. So I'll stream Spectre.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. I'm glad it helped. So, if you have any questions from the chat, I'm happy to answer them.
I'll
If
call
not,
him
I
out.
will just cool.
Yeah.
And I will just continue with this one, and we can also go back to this one if you like.
All right.
So, what do we have here?
Smoke.
Smoke and mirror. Okay. The intention of the work, a combination of the zodiac pieces, yin and yang, smoke and mirror, obsidian and volcanic glass, and some clouds. Okay. I think the most important thing here is to think about what you guys or what you as a creator want with this piece. For example, if it's an illustration, then I would ask you, why is the background just gray? Why is it this specific format? If it's a concept art piece, to figure out the design of these two creatures, then it doesn't have to have a background or a specific format, because it's not about a finished piece that could stand on its own. It's more about the design. So this would be the first question, or the first thing I as a creator of this piece would try to figure out what I want. And if it's an illustration, I would say try to make the background work with the content and add some content. Because if you now try to finish this and later add a background, it might not work together. And the background also can help you a lot by bringing the best out of these two creatures. For example, if you have this yin and yang S-shaped movement in here, you can pick up stuff like this in the background as well, like using the background to enforce whatever you want to say with the other elements. If you have this motion in the background, it can be subtle and doesn't have to be connected to the creatures, but it can be maybe some abstract lines, maybe some cloudy shapes, something. It really doesn't matter. But if you use the background to make the whole thing even more striking, then the whole piece in the end will be definitely richer and more interesting. The format as well is something I would think about. Why is, for example, this less than this, or at least it looks a little bit less? I would balance it out more because it's very symmetrical. So I would definitely check that this is maybe sitting right in the middle and make everything a bit more like on purposely symmetrical. So I would probably make sure this frame here is maybe a bit more like this, cut, or even be bold enough and say, okay, there's no importance to this area here on the side, so why not cut it in a more like the other piece here, in a more card frame thing, so we really can focus on the two creatures, because this dead area here on the side is not really helping out at the moment. So this works better from my taste. Regarding the rendering, I would say it's all the same in the whole piece. So I would probably try to establish a focal point on those two creatures, so maybe probably around the head, maybe get a few more details in here, or maybe a secondary color or something that really draws our attention. And the same here. So we have this duality. So we have this black and white, left and right, like up and down, yin and yang. You really feel that. That should be the goal, because at the moment it's just black and white, but it's not. The structure of the whole piece is could be even more based on this duality. And I feel like when you go with something that iconic and that symbolism and stuff, I would try to make it as simple as possible, and then try to work with every aspect of it. Like if you have something here, like it could be a different color, then maybe put the same color here. So you have the two colors, but only in these two spots. So we have the attention to the heads, which is in the character design probably the most important part. So people will probably look at the head more than the tail. In that case, I would make sure these pieces or these areas are the most important and most interesting areas. With your secondary shapes, like these swirls here, I would probably avoid having them straight like this, because they really work against your dynamic S shape. So I would probably use them, and if you have something like this, use them and make the swirls follow these lines and work with the design instead against it.
I didn't see them.
You can also disconnect shapes. Like if you have the clouds, you can add some more that are flying around it to just be there and support the image. Same for the artificial shapes here. You can also use some disconnected elements to pull the whole thing together. It doesn't have to make sense. It's a stylized piece. So use the shapes to guide the eye and make sure the whole thing has a nice flow. I think the one other thing is the colors are really black and white. Even if it's black and white, I would probably introduce a secondary color to make sure something happens in the clouds here or in the reflections of this obsidian piece. If you look at obsidian, there's a lot of green colors in there, or reflective colors from the environment. And I would love to see some color variations in here, just a hint of it, so we don't feel like this is just black and white. It can be very desaturated, but I think to add a bit more variance of colors would really help the piece. It can be, let's say, if we talk about this green, put in here some greens in there, just to also connect these two features a bit more. I mean, it's really basic, but I think making it a bit more rich in color is always a good idea. And then if you realize it's not working out, you can always try to pull it back into black and white. I always try to think about the whole thing before I start talking about brushwork or maybe anatomy or anything like these details, I would call them. They are the secondary thing. The most important thing is, how is the piece structured? What do you want with the piece? What's your message? And what's the feeling behind the movement and the flow and the elements you put in? As soon as you figure that out and that works, you can put in design and actual content. At least that's how I work. I usually work like, okay, I want something with a yin and yang, black and white duality, and I don't really focus that much on what the design of these two fish are in the beginning. I just try to figure out how do I need to put in the shapes and the colors and the lines, like the action lines. And then as soon as I know that, I think about, okay, which characters could I introduce here? Okay, what about two fish? Because it goes well with the flow and everything, like there's the swimming and everything. And then I search for stuff that fits on the content side with my structure of the piece. As long as I have the full control of the piece. Sometimes if you have a client, you need to put in stuff they want you to put in. But if I can choose freely as possible, I usually think about the composition first and the content last, and then I finish it as far as I want. Yeah, I think that's it.
I believe Pao is not in the audience. Must be, I don't know, maybe she's sleeping.
Yeah, she can check it out afterwards on YouTube.
Yep, it's gonna be recorded. Everything's recorded.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Oh, it really was. Like, especially with specters, like the gesture, when you started telling us like it's already a fantasy stylized piece. You might as well push it, right? So, oh yeah, right, right. So thank you for that.
I
And yeah,
didn't prepare the feedback, so I was more like trying to get it on spontaneously. But I usually like that more because then it really comes from the moment. And of
hmm
course, you can find a lot more stuff that is done well or could be better, whatever. But I think a lot of things I do is based on emotion and being in that specific moment. And I use that a lot, this energy a lot for painting myself, like in my pieces.
yeah,
I need to feel it in that moment I paint it. And if that's not the case, I usually doing something wrong and I'm searching for what's going wrong. And I always try to look at the piece and wait until I know it's finished. I cannot really explain when that is the case, but I need to have the feeling, okay, this is finished. And as long as I don't feel that, I will keep pushing the piece and I will think about what can be done better. So being in the moment is one of the most important things for me. So I think this is also what I want to do with this feedback. Just go with the flow of the moment. Maybe this is something helpful as well.
sure it did. We got one question from the audience. How often
Nice.
do you use blending modes in your work?
I use them a lot. I usually put in stuff wildly to create a chaos first and then
Oh,
pulling the sliders, pushing and experimenting, and the blending modes are definitely helpful with that because sometimes you don't really know what happens if you use them. You can put in a color and just go through all of them and see what happens if you do a color dodge or maybe an add layer or whatever it is, and then happy accident happens. And I really like if I don't have the control over it in the beginning, and I really push myself to create that chaos, to lose control a bit in the beginning. And I feel like these modes are really helpful in that regard. Even if I don't like it, I can
they
go
always go
back.
back.
But yeah, exactly.
Control Z, different layer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, don't be
Oh, are
afraid
you?
of just
Yeah,
go
trying
nuts.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go, Ella. Just for you. Happy accidents. Love that. All right. Before we wrap up, like, is there anything you need support on, like subscribers for a channel? Where can the people find you?
They can find me everywhere. I try to be as available as possible. My handle is always Dominik Mayer Art. You can find me with that handle on Twitter, on Insta, and ArtStation everywhere. Yeah, if you want to follow, I would appreciate it.
Drop the socials right there, and we'll also link it down in the description below. So once again, Dominic, thank you so much for
Welcome.
taking the time for this interview. I hope you had fun, man.
Oh
And
yeah,
we
of course.
we certainly loved your insight, and you're very zen, and you're very how do fine, we can say it's chill, like you're very calm and relaxed. You sound like a calm and reasonable person.
I try to be.
Thank you, man. And
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
sure a lot of the other subscribers and future viewers of this video will feel inspired from that. Like, it's nice to get different perspectives from another part of the world, from other continent. It's different
Oh
here in
yeah,
Asia versus there in
definitely.
European countries. So uh, I hope you learned a bit of some things here from some of the things I rambled about Asians and
Yeah, of
stuff,
course.
and parents wanting us to take nursing, medicine, engineer.
It's yeah. I would actually love to hear much more. Yeah, would have enjoyed a lot more conversation here. But let's
Yeah.
let's keep it short, and we can maybe if you want to talk again, let's just let me know.
Oh, you guys heard that here. Maybe a part two in like a year or so. Like, what's different? So keep
Oh yeah,
stay subscribed for
yeah.
that, guys. And we got some nice, cool things planned for you guys in the future. So we're
Nice.
gonna cut it right here. So once again, Dominic, thank you so much, and
Thank
from
you.
whoever's watching, whatever time it is of the day. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. But if you're still looking for more ways you can learn, just head on down to our website at brushpoint.io, where you can watch behind the scenes of this video, watch our live interviews and artist interviews a week earlier, art processes, tutorials, art talks, and lives every single Friday, and even a way to join our Discord community. Just check out that website. Well, that's it. If you want to share this knowledge, well, share with your friends. Like the video, and of course, subscribe if you want more content like this. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.